Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Thoroughbred Underdog. It's been quite some time since I last did a video on this channel. Still alive and well. Just haven't gotten a chance to watch a lot of wrestling. Thus, haven't had the opportunity to upload a lot of shorts or content. I don't want to just get on here and shoot the breeze, randomly, when I'm not really consuming the content. I don't want to give blind opinions on anybody's wrestling or companies or events or anything like that. But there's a video and a subject that I've been wanting to do a video on for quite some time now. And, a lot of times they tell you if you wait for the perfect time to do something, you're going to be waiting for quite some time. It's, you don't want to do that because the perfect time never comes. So sometimes you just got to wing it and just do it. And that's what I'm doing here. I mean, there was a part of me that wanted to wait until I got another haircut. But most of my videos you all see in the shorts and such, I'm ECW as fuck on these channels, on these videos, on these shorts. I come in hardcore, unkempt, and careless. Because I don't want you to focus on that. I want you to focus on the subject at hand. And the subject at hand here that I've been wanting to do for a while is basically how in wrestling and in life in general, variety is the spice of life. And how I learned so from a very early age from video games. One video game in particular being Street Fighter. Now you're going to watch this and you're going to wonder, how does this pertain to wrestling? Well, let's get straight into it. First off, the first Street Fighter game I played was on Sega Genesis, and it was Street Fighter 2. May have been Turbo, maybe been Championship Edition, but it was Street Fighter 2. And what I loved about Street Fighter back then was the variety of characters. Then outside of Ken and Ryu, every character was different. Bison, you had him as he was basically the evil general who had psycho powers. He had the ability to levitate and fly and shock you. He's basically Street Fighter's Raiden, with the Psycho Crusher, what have you. Then you have a character like Blanka, who's basically like your wild man character. He's green. He's basically Street Fighter's Incredible Hulk type character. You got E Honda, your sumo wrestler. Chun-Li, your detective agent, but she is a killer with kicks. You have Guile, your good old American character. He has the sonic boom. Ryu and Ken, basically Ken is mentored Ryu, right? And they have a similar move set. So that makes sense, right? On the flip, you have Fei Long, who's basically one of the first Bruce Lee inspired characters in the fighting game. So he has a Jeet Kune Do type style. And then last but not least, you have your E Hondas. When I said E Honda already, but Dhalsim, who is basically an Indian version of Mr. Fantastic. Now, I think there's one or two characters I'm leaving out. Oh, then you have your wrestler, Russian character, Zangief. Now, what I learned about this was that each character was different, and I loved that. Street Fighter is one of the pioneering fighting games. It paved the way for many other fighting games. Mortal Kombat, along with Street Fighter, pretty much was the Rakim, the God MCs of fighting games. Those two games were the WCW and the WWE of fighting games. Of course, I think WWE would be the Mortal Kombat later in its Attitude Era. And WCW would be the Street Fighter. It's a little bit more clean. Aside from the aftermath that you would get when you defeat somebody and seeing their face all bruised up and bloody. It was pretty tame. But the thing is about wrestling and Street Fighter is this. Wrestling has had multiple eras. In the 70s, 60s, 50s, you had the NWA era, early NWA era. You had your George Hackenschmidts, your Luthazes. I would like to say that's the pioneer innovation era. You had Luthez and Frank Gotch and these guys innovating a lot of the moves we see today. Power bombs, German suplexes and such, right? Luthez innovated a lot of moves. And your George Hackenschmidts, who were some of the first NWA champions. NWA is practically the oldest world, wrestling federation there is today. It's still going today, right? So then we fast forward to the era that most of us, as it will go as far back, is probably the 60s. And you have, well, I can't name any wrestlers from the 60s. That's saying something. But, well, my alarm was going out. As you all can hear it, it's 3-minute warnings thing. But, you'll probably hear Tupac in a little bit. Checkout time, because this is my old alarm from when I got off at work. I'm going to turn my phone off here. Sorry for the interruption. But, so like in the 70s, you had your Andres, your Harley Races. In the 60s and such, I think you had your Ernie Latts and maybe even your Gorilla Monsoons and such like that, right? Each era of wrestling, there was a specific look, a specific style. 70s, 60s, you had Bruno Sammartino and Pedro Morales, all these guys just really wrestled in tights and boots. It was more so about the spectacle. It wasn't a lot of moves being done. Okay, cool. 80s, start getting to, 84, 85, you get your Hulk Hogan's and your Macho Man, and later on your Ted DiBiase's. And 89, 87, I think you get your Ultimate Warriors, right? So it starts to become more about color and the rock and wrestling and celebrity and looking more like a comic book, because that's what wrestling was around. And wrestling has always mirrored what was going on big in society. So the 90s, we got a little bit more grungy and gritty and attitudinal around maybe 97, 98-ish, Stone Cold. And a lot of people have this misconception about Stone Cold, is that he started to get really popular after the King of Ring, when in reality, he wasn't even booked a lot after that. He didn't really start getting hot until like 97, 98. But he didn't immediately get to the moon after the 96 King of the Ring speech, right? So wrestling has always mirrored what was going on in society. It was always a reflection of society. And what makes wrestling great from the 80s and onward, since the 70s is more so boots and tights era and what have you, people were just coming to see the show. They didn't know it was work, is characters, and how each character had a unique voice, a unique look. Maybe the overall theme was, hey, everybody looks like a comic book character in the 80s, right? Action figure in real life, Ultimate Warriors, Hulk Hogan's, Macho Man. Ric Flair was just over the top. Dusty Rhodes was over the top. But all of them were different from one another. And as we go into the 90s, we start to see more unique voices and different characters, and everybody being of the same era and that same reflection of society, but also being unique in their own individuality. So then we have a guy like Stone Cold Steve Austin. In the 90s, we have The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Triple H, Mankind, Undertaker, Kane, X-Pac, Gangrel, the Oddities. I mean, from everybody onto the card, from the very bottom of the pyramid to the very top tip of the pyramid, everybody had a unique voice, a unique thing, a unique character, all right? Now, on the WCW side, you had the same thing. You had Glaciers, you had Mortises, you had Goldbergs, Kevin Nashes, Diamond Dallas Pages, Hollywood Hogans. So, and even in rap, everything about the 90s, everybody had to have a unique sound, a unique voice, their own hits. Nothing was allowed to sound the same as everybody else. Nothing. Old Dirty Bastard sounded different than DMX. DMX sounded different from Tupac. Tupac sounded different from Biggie. Biggie sounded different from Big Pun. Big Pun just sounded different from Big L. And everybody had that one allure that, well, allured you to them, right? Now, the problem with wrestling today, okay, and how it relates to what I just said about the 90s and the 80s and wrestlers back then, is that the wrestling today isn't as outstanding as what it once was. You may say, well, thoroughbred, underdog. What do you mean? These wrestlers are more athletic than they've ever been. They're not doing any drugs as much as the previous generations did. They're doing moves that you will have never fathomed being able to be performed, all these flips and such. But the thing is if everybody's doing unique moves and outstanding moves, then nobody's doing unique moves and outstanding moves. Because everybody's doing it. And that's why AEW is having a hard time right now, because people are starting to realize that everybody kind of wrestles the same. Everybody is a high flyer. Everybody does a lot of flips. And this is one of the downsides. And I have ambivalence towards Ricochet going to AEW, because in an earlier video, I was happy. In one of my shorts, I was happy they left and went to AEW. And I always felt he would be a better fit there. But here's the thing, and why I'm ambivalent about it. When I think of AEW, one of the comparisons I always used to make, and then across the internet, if the opportunity presented itself, if the conversation of WWE versus AEW was broached, my thing is, I always said AEW was more so, if you took Grand Theft Auto versus Saints Row, AEW would be Saints Row. It's a little bit more over the top, a little bit more emphasis on having fun as soon as you get it in there, and just all over the place, right? And then WWE would be the more serious of the two. The one where it may take some time to build up to get to that fun, but you do get to that fun. And it feels more, it's the McDonald's of its genre. People don't think of Saints Row first. They think of Grand Theft Auto first. So but in essence of that, because they say Grand Theft Auto first, everything else is a Grand Theft Auto clone. Everything else is second. So WWE would be Grand Theft Auto, AEW Saints Row. But I also used to say, video game-wise, and it's kind of quaint, AEW is more stylistically, the way the flow of the matches are, reminds me, even the storylines, it's kind of random, and people are turning heel left and right. One minute they're heel. You watch one episode, they're heel. The next episode, they're babyface. The storylines seem kind of random. AEW reminds me a lot of SmackDown too, because of the pace of the matches, the no selling, the randomness of storylines. And WWE reminds me very much of, well, how their games are now. Simulation-based, trying to be more realistic, and sometimes takes the fun out of the game. But when you really get into it, like, oh, I like this. It's kind of fun. Some people like to just pick up and play. So AEW is for a certain audience. And I'm all about duality. I feel at this point, you got to have both. You got to have AEW because AEW is the company that is more for the video game matches, right? But WWE is more for the storylines, the deep stories, the stuff that you could get entrenched to, the stuff that you could bring to somebody and say, read this storyline like a book. Okay, back to Ricochet. Ricochet had a unique style in WWE. But in AEW, there are a lot of people that wrestle the way Ricochet, even Real Ospreay wrestles. And it goes back to that one time that Dave Meltzer gave a lot of those flippy matches 5 stars. But then he had a match, I think, with Kalani Jordan and I think Sal Ruka, right? And he said it was just okay. But the women's wrestlers did a lot of the same stuff that if it happened in AEW, probably would have gotten a higher rating from him. Shit, it probably would have been a 7-star if it happened in Japan. So the thing is Ricochet goes to AEW, and now he's competing to see, okay, am I the best one of the 100 people on the roster who do this style? Whereas in WWE, he was the only one who did that style. And Ricochet is still an android to me. He's still a unique, unworldly wrestler. Up there with guys like AJ Styles when he was in, his prime, Kurt Angle, Brock Lesnar, Ospreay, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, wrestlers who I just don't think are human. I think they're androids because of how just fathomless their talent is. It's just too deep to be understood how much talent these guys have, or had, some of them in their prime. But we go back to the original premise of this video, styles. Street Fighter. Okay. What do you have? You got your Mr. Fantastic. You got your psychotic despot leader. You got your American-made dude. You got your fast legs Chinese FBI detective in Chun-Li. Okay, you got your big beefy wrestler and your Fei Longs and what have you, all right? Let me ask you guys this. What would the Street Fighter games be if the entire roster was E Honda? What would the entire Street Fighter game be if everybody was Fei Long? What would the Street Fighter game be if everybody was Dawson? What would the Street Fighter game be if everybody was Zangief? It would be a sumo wrestling game. It would be a Stretch Armstrong game. It would be a Bruce Lee emulator game. It would be a wrestling game. You got to have identity. You have to stand out. Everybody is making chili nowadays. But what are you putting in your chili to make your shit taste way better than the next person's? What element, what ingredient, what additive are you putting in your chili to make it taste better than the person on the right of me, the person on the left of me? That's why variety is the spice of life. And you got to have it. You cannot be the same as everybody else, and that's the problem with wrestling nowadays. I marvel at some of the flips these guys can do. It's incredible. The women's wrestlers, I think they're more I like them more for the submissions I've seen some of these women's wrestlers come up with and some of the cool flips and such. I mean, NXT in of itself, probably has the best women's roster to date. And they're all like beginning, just starting. A couple of these women have only been a year and a half in a business. Just started learning how to wrestle under the WWE Performance Center umbrella. But they're able to perform these radical moves, these spectacular, awe-inspiring moves. But this is the era we're in, right? Attitude was more about characters and mic work, right? But everybody had a different character. Gangrel was a vampire. Road Dogg was a loudmouth. Rock was, Elvis. He had the Elvis thing going for a little bit, but he's basically wrestling as Elvis at that point. He was a jock. Stone Cold was a surly redneck. Undertaker was a satanic cult leader, which, you know, he kind of borrowed elements from Kevin Sullivan when he was had his Army of Darkness, right? Kane was Undertaker's brother who survived the house or the funeral home being burnt down. But everybody had a different character. It was about mic work. Okay, Ruthless Aggression was about athleticism with an edge. You know, I mean, look at the SmackDown 6 in 2002, 2003. Okay, PG era was about, hey, the indie guys are making it on big stage. But Daniel Bryan was different from CM Punk. He wrestled a different style. Batista was different from them. John Cena was different from them. Randy Orton was different from them. In 2024, you got to do a little bit more. The flips and stuff is cool. The moves and stuff are nice. But we need some spice. We need some variety. And that's why MJF stands out. That's why, you know, Roman Reigns stands out. That's why Cody stands out. Nobody wants to see the same act over and over again. That's why wrestling's like a talent show. If you come out and you do the same exact motion, act, performance as the previous act, you start to catch on after a while. Nobody wants to see that. Cody is different from Roman. They're both different from MJF. Even if there is some elements of previous characters, i.e. Roddy Piper, MJF, or, you know, LA Knight reminding you of The Rock, they're all different. And I would like to see more gimmicks come back to wrestling, but be a little bit more grounded in reality. I like Wendy Chu. And some people may say, well, what's this hokey shit? But Wendy Chu is kind of relevant. I mean, you got creepypastas and stuff like that, and people talk about sleep paralysis. Her character is basically a sleep paralysis demon. And it makes sense with her first character being, she's kind of like the sleepy, you know what I mean, sleepy hair character. The narcoleptic gimmick, which I don't think's ever been done prior to her doing it. But that's what sticks out to me. Those are the wrestlers that I like. I like wrestlers who, same thing with movies, right? When The Quiet Place came out, I've never seen anything like A Quiet Place. Now, you all could correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, if there's ever been anything like that. But to me, Quiet Place is innovative. Movies like Get Out are innovative. Fucking black guys having the souls of slave masters, white slave masters, telling people to get out. That's an original concept. A Quiet Place, you make the slightest noise, and these monsters get irritated and try to come after you. Now they got a game out. So in 2024 into 2025, I hope that we see more characters. Wrestlers who wrestle more styles that are different from what's the norm now, because everybody's doing flippy dippy shit. Now, when we had 2000 and we had the Hardy Boys, one of the only people in WWE or tag teams doing it, you had the Dudleys, who was more brawlers, and they was putting people through tables. And then you had Edge and Christian, which is pretty much like the the goofy jocks at a college, dorm party that somehow would get. If you really look back at Edge and Christian, they was pretty much Shawn Michaels in the Hell in a Cell match their entire run. They would get their asses kicked and somehow they win at the end, even though they got their asses kicked the entire match. But it made sense and it fit them. And that's what people want the Attitude Era to come back. I don't think it's so much the Attitude Era. That would never come back. Because the Attitude Era is a reflection of the way society was. And society would have to be that way again for WWE to reflect that. I think people really, what they want is unique characters with unique promo skills and doesn't sound the same as everybody else. I think people want more variety. We don't want a bunch of E Hondas. We don't want the game to be filled with just Ryu. We want variety. And that's what wrestling is sorely missing.